This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world. This is John Bailey with White Plains Week, the City News Roundup show. And I'm joined, as always, by Jim Benerofe of Suburban Street, longtime dean of the School of Journalism in White Plains, and by Peter Katz, the anchor for all seasons, who is also an editor of the Westchester County Business Journal these days. And right now we go to the headlines and Jim Benerofe.
Here are the headlines for the week of April 21st, 2017. County Executive Robert P. Astorino promises no tax increases in 2018 budget. State Senator George Latimer announces a string of endorsements for county executive position by county leaders going into the Democratic County Convention May 10th. The White Plains School Board Superintendent choice, Dr. Joseph Rica from Elmsford, is scheduled to be appointed May 10th with a meet and greet reception beforehand. Contract still to be negotiated. Council of Neighborhood Associations raises surprisingly few city issues. Washington errors on the direction its naval task force was heading in the vast Pacific. Perfectly understandable. It's a big ocean. We'll have another exciting episode of the White Plains Week exclusive feature, Trump the President, with Trump watcher Peter Katz, the reality show that is reality. The White House Daily, a Trump triumph. The Westchester County Association mobilizes a task force to get real estate sales moving. Dan Walsh, Program Director for Westchester Power, appears on People to be Heard this week and tells how the new green energy and basic rates are being determined. Christine Rolfmeyer, head of the Women's Club of White Plains Foundation, an indefatigable and successful fundraiser and philanthropist, is named Citizen Extraordinaire 2017 by the White Plains Historical Society. The Percy Granger Society will hold a reception celebrating the Historical Society designation of the Percy Granger House as a city landmark. Westchester County honors Armando Galella as a hero.
Thank you, Jim. And we'll go to the White Plains Week Rolo Newsreel March of Time for April 21st. And there is the County Executive, Westchester County, Robert Astorino, delivering his address last night, his State of the County address, and some of the things that he hit. Next slide, please. He pointed out that the Westchester County Airport proposals are due in 90 days, and the legislature is offering bipartisan support. He's pointed out one of his achievements is the North 60 Biotech Project, upper right, and he announced that Playland would open May the 13th, but we are still awaiting the big upfront payment by Standard Amusements. And he also pointed out he's asking to sue to stop the Indian Point from closing without protecting local revenues. some of
Well,
the four big issues.
what he wants to do is file a lawsuit alleging that they did not follow environmental procedures when Cuomo and Entergy and Riverkeeper came to the agreement to close Indian Point. The Board of Legislators must approve the Westchester County filing a lawsuit, and whether they have the votes to actually get that through the Board of Legislators remains a question at this point.
Right.
On the county airport, he did point out that they have requests for proposals, which are due back in another month or so from people who might like to take over the airport. There would be an upfront payment required. That would help him balance the budget.
About 15
coming up.
million, I think.
About 15 million at stake on that. And then the county would receive funds from the airport operator
For a
during
long
the
time.
course of what may be a 40-year lease. That has met some objections. And in fact, the Democratic response to the county executive's State of the County message was recorded by Board of Legislators Minority Leader Catherine Borgia. Here are a couple of excerpts.
Mr. Astorino tried to negotiate a backroom deal to effectively sell off the county airport to cover his own fiscal mismanagement. For a brief cash advance, Westchester would have lost millions in revenue in the long term. Instead, Democrats compelled the administration to conduct a fair and open process. Legislators like Lyndon Williams are working to ensure that any proposed airport privatization plan is the best deal for all Westchester taxpayers, even if that means no deal at all. While Mr. Astorino welcomed and justified a gun show where Nazi and Confederate memorabilia was sold, we stood with thousands of taxpayers against this misuse of our county facilities. We need policies that will put Westchester back on sound fiscal footing. Passing Democratic initiatives and putting wasteful lawsuits and pet projects behind us is the right place to start. Westchester County is our home. Where Rob Astorino's policies have set us back, Democrats have the plan to move all of us forward together.
Now, Astorino's State of the County address was carried live on News 12, on Verizon Fios 1, and also streamed live on Facebook by the county executive's office. It took place at the county office building. They have a little auditorium there, which actually it's the jury room. You know, if you're called to jury duty, they bring you in there along with a bunch of other people. That's where the jury pools are assembled. So it saw some political use last night. We're recording this Friday morning. The speech was last night, Thursday night.
Right. Now, speaking of politics, George Latimer put out a news release claiming that he has 24 endorsements from leaders around the northeast part of the county, and the southeast of the county, and the northwest part of the county, and not as many endorsements from the Yonkers area, which Ken Jenkins, the other candidate for the Democratic nomination for county executive, has put out some shows of his support too. So we'll see how that divides. Mr. Latimer, by the way, will be interviewed by people to be heard next week.
Yeah, and you'll be able to see that interview on many of these same stations or on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, actually, or on YouTube. Or at wpcommunitymedia.org, where you can see a lot of this stuff. Now, you know, just how it's going to play out, we will have to wait for the Democratic County Convention to see. One thing that we continue to see, however, whether it's here in Westchester County or at the national level, is that in political years, Democrats have great difficulty getting together and being unified. Here, with Astorino, you know, already making it plain that he's in the race. In fact, you know, he's running. He has a well-oiled machine that he has built up for himself. He has good funding for a rerun for county executive. With all of that unfolding, we still see the Democrats fighting among themselves.
It is not a time to be fighting. It's a time to figure out how you are going to restore services and all these terrible things that Mr. Astorino has apparently taken away without raising taxes, whereas Mr. Astorino is going to say, I haven't raised taxes in 8 years. How could you people have been the previous.
Certain to be a major issue.
I mean, it's hard, but do taxes matter to people? That'll answer the question.
Well, actually, right here in White Plains, I think people are going to be wondering whether the new school superintendent is going to be a hold the line on taxes or a let's spend as much as we can and raise as many dollars as we can in taxes. That's coming up.
Well, as long as the tax cap is in effect, they can't do that. But we're now rolling along at a 3% increase every year.
Yeah, but you found out this week just who the new superintendent is going to be, so it appears.
Right. Well, he was announced, and they are now in the process of negotiating his contract.
And his name is?
Dr. Joseph Ricca.
And he is from?
Elmsford. Now, as I have pointed out, Elmsford's test scores are not as good as White Plains in the key areas that White Plains needs to address. So, and we're awaiting some real talk about and see what this man will bring to bring us out and put some stability in the school district.
The way it stands now, on May 10th, there's going to be a meet and greet where they will formally introduce him to the community, and you'll have the opportunity to chat and find out just what's going to be going on in the future at the White Plains schools.
Exactly. Now, the Council of Neighborhood Associations met this week. I attended. That was a picture. It was a good turnout. And what intrigued me was what they did not talk about. Now, what did they talk about? They were worried, Jim, about developments downtown size when everything gets built. They were worried about traffic in the downtown. They also, can I have the slide back? Yes, they were also worried about speeding in the neighborhoods. There was a lot of talk about the potholes not being fixed. And once again, that great old issue, the comprehensive plan was raised. We have to redo the comprehensive plan. But what they didn't talk about was red light cameras, a very impactful thing that is apparently still working on. And they didn't raise anything else. And what was funny to me is every one of those associations are from the perimeter. There was no one really taking the case for the downtown there. And I was just really intrigued with that. Does this all sound like familiar territory to you, Jim?
It certainly does. It's going to be interesting to see what happens politically as far as the downtown is concerned, because you're going to have some 4,000 new apartments. Now, I don't know how many voters that's going to amount to, and are they going to be, they won't necessarily be people who are from White Plains. They people outside, and how much participation they play in politics will be interesting to see.
You raise an excellent point. It could tilt down towards a more participatory democracy. You know? But meanwhile, speaking of participating, it's time for the shocker of the week. And that shocker of the week is that we were told last week that our aircraft carrier task force was steaming towards North Korea. And apparently it did not. Peter?
Well, the question, John, is did the White House and Department of Defense lose an aircraft carrier and a bunch of other warships? Or was the commander-in-chief given wrong information? Or was he just making up a story to try to bluff North Korea's Kim Jong-un? Last week, when Kim Jong-un was rattling his rockets to try to scare the U.S. and South Korea and Japan and threatening to test another nuclear bomb, President Trump announced that as a show of force, the U.S. was sending the aircraft carrier Vinson and its task force of other ships to the waters off North Korea. For about a week, this country's allies watched and waited for the ships to show up. And while the White House and Trump administrations kept talking as if the ships were now in place to send a message to the North Korean dictator, it turned out that the ships were sailing in the opposite direction, towards Australia. They weren't turned around, and they didn't start heading toward the Korean peninsula until a few days ago. This week, at a White House news briefing, Press Secretary Sean Spicer was pressed by reporters for an explanation of just what was going on.
The statement that was put out was that the Carl Vinson Group was headed to the Korean Peninsula. It is headed to the Korean Peninsula. It'll arrive there. What's that?
It's headed there now. It wasn't headed there
Sure,
last
no,
week.
but that's not what we ever said. We said that it was heading there, and it was heading there. It is heading there. So that remains.
An impression that allies had.
But if there's an impression, then that's not. Then there should have been clarification from people who were seeking it. But I mean, PACOM put out a release talking about what its ultimate destination was going to be, and that's where it ended up. Caitlin.
Well, why did the administration never clarify? Because it definitely, the intent in media reports was that it was headed there now, and now it's going to be there
But that
2 weeks
wasn't,
later.
with all due respect, that's not my. We were asked a question.
Commented on it, though.
I know, no, that's not true. What I was asked was what signal did it send that it was going there, and I answered that question correctly at the time. That it signaled foreign presence, strength, and a reassurance to our allies. That's a true statement. You're asking me why you didn't know better. I don't know. That's a question that should have been followed up with either PACOM or the Department of Defense. But the only question that we were asked was what signal it sends, and I think we answered that very correctly at the time.
I think it was a little misleading. No one found out about it until a picture was posted on a
What do you mean?
page.
What part is misleading? I'm trying to figure that out. We were asked a question about what signal it sent. We answered the question on what signal it sent. I'm not the one who commented on timing.
What's misleading is that people thought it was headed there now, and now it's going to be there weeks later. They thought it was already headed there. And it
But
wasn't.
again,
It was doing
that's
an exercise. before
I
it was
understand
going
the
there.
question, right? But what I'm getting at is, it was announced that it was going. It will be there. We were asked simply a question on that. I think all other questions should be asked of the Department of Defense. John.
You ever have a feeling you're watching a sketch on Saturday Night Live?
They're going to have fun with this one.
You want to do the
I
rest?
say, it's a big ocean out there.
You want to do the rest of the Saturday Night Live sketch now?
Oh, there's so much material.
Trump and
He
Trump,
could do White Place Week, Sean. We can invite him on when he eventually gets fired.
Shall we just do Trump the President segment?
Let's do that.
All right, okay. The official leading the Justice Department's investigation into Trump's ties to Russia and its meddling in the 2016 election is leaving her position next month. Acting Assistant Attorney General Mary B. McCord told the staff of the department's National Security Division this week she is leaving to pursue other opportunities, including, get this, John, spending more time with her family. We don't know whether she's leaving on her own or was pushed out because she's heading the investigation into Trump. President Trump declared that Iran is violating the nuclear deal it has with world powers. During the campaign, Trump said he'd pull out of the deal, which blocks Iran from further development of its nuclear weapons program. But at the same time, Trump had said that, it turns out that his Secretary of State, Mr. Tillerson, was telling Congress and actually affirming to Congress certification, which is required every 90 days, that Iran is complying with the terms of the deal. In a news conference in which Italian Premier Paolo Gentiloni was participating after meeting with Trump, Trump said, 1, the U.S. is committed to a strong Europe, although he didn't say directly whether he supports the European Union. 2, he sees no military role for the U.S. in stabilizing Libya. 3, and we don't know why this came up, it's possible that he may soon be able to strike deals with Congress on both health care and funding legislation to head off a government shutdown, which might happen as early as tomorrow, Saturday, because the government runs out of money, at least on paper. Republicans in the House have been working on a new repeal and replace Obamacare bill, which would allow insurance companies to drop coverage for basics and allow premiums to triple and allow insurance companies to walk away from you if you have a pre-existing condition. This week, Trump telephoned the would-be dictator of Turkey, President Erdogan, to congratulate him on winning a referendum in which his powers would be expanded and Turkish democracy would be diminished. Evidence has been shown that the referendum was rigged and Erdogan's people stuffing ballots with extra ballots. There are 2 Trump towers in Istanbul, Turkey, and some of Erdogan's opponents say they should be turned into Turkish buildings, not Trump towers. Republican and Democratic congressional aides report that a review of surveillance material shows that neither President Obama's former National Security Advisor Susan Rice nor any other Obama administration official did anything improper or illegal with respect to intelligence operations. Trump had told the New York Times he believed Rice broke the law by asking for the identities of Trump aides who were mentioned in transcripts of U.S. surveillance targets. When the New York Times asked Trump on April 5th if Rice broke the law, Trump said, "Do I think? Yes, I think. I think it's going to be the biggest story. It's such an important story for our country and the world. But now both Republicans and Democrats say there is no story. She did nothing wrong." Candidate Donald Trump criticized President Barack Obama for taking a vacation during the summer to Martha's Vineyard and making a trip in December to Hawaii. "Well, you're in the White House," Trump said at the time. What's better than the White House? Why all these vacations? Since his January inauguration, President Trump has spent 7 of the 13 weekends at his Palm Beach, Florida estate. It's estimated that each weekend costs us $3 million. Now, $3 million times 7 is $21 million just in the first 13 weeks of him holding office and making trips to Mar-a-Lago. If the schedule holds up that way, it'll work out to $331 million for trips to Mar-a-Lago in his 4-year term.
Double that for the second term.
At the Easter egg roll at the White House this week, members of the Trump family were standing on the Truman balcony overlooking the crowd below. When the national anthem began, young Baron Trump put his hand over his heart. Melania Trump put her hand over her heart. And Donald Trump just stood there with his hands at his sides until Melania gave him a poke in the side, which got him to put his hand over his heart.
Very good. And one more Trump item. We have been receiving from the White House a new communication called the 1600 Daily. In this newsletter, which comes in the form of email, contains videos. It lists the president's schedule and also gives video clips of key situations. It's a new wrinkle in journalism, and it's actually probably the only really
it's very
thing.
consistent with the other things the Trump administration has been doing to bypass the press, to bypass editors, to bypass columnists, to bypass criticism, and reach out directly to its base.
And put out his brand.
Now, some will call it this sort of thing propaganda. It all depends on what you put in it and whether it is truthful or whether it is slanted and whether it just reports certain things that you want to report and ignores other things that you do not want to report.
Well, it certainly is an era where you got to keep track of all the fake news that's running around out there.
Indeed. There's some real news coming out of the governor's office. The city of White Plains is going to get some new state money. This was just announced this week by Cuomo. $1,211,320 will be flowing into the White Plains coffers to construct pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Imagine that.
Yes, how about bridges over the roads, which are going to be pretty trafficky. Meanwhile, speaking of other items, the Westchester County Association sent out an email this week talking about their Smart Growth for Westchester initiative and saying that they're going to have a Westchester Development Action Plan that will regard municipal planning, zoning, financial incentives, and attaining affordable workforce housing. And that should be coming up. And they're also going to be having a real estate task force to try and get Westchester real estate moving. What do you think has to be done to get Westchester real estate?
Well, I don't know. When they're talking about getting Westchester real estate moving, I mean, White Plains is building 4,000 apartments. I don't know how much faster it can move.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying this is what they feel. I think they're talking residential
I don't
stuff.
know whether they're talking commercial properties. I think that the office space market is, I don't know whether it's as slow as it was, but it's at best mediocre, and I don't know what they can do necessarily to get that going. I think the industrial market is relatively strong. You know, I don't know exactly what they're aiming at. Do they want to turn properties over? Or?
They have had a series of these task forces for a lot of publicity, but we really don't get a lot of reports on the results of that.
Just one thing I want to mention about the Westchester County Association. Bill Mooney, who has been the head of that for a long, long time, is going to go into the banking sector. He has taken a position with a major bank. I don't know that it's been announced yet by the county association, but do look for a job notification regarding Bill Mooney of the Westchester County Association.
Okay.
You know, although New York has a governor's mansion in Albany, Governor Cuomo doesn't stay there all the time, preferring instead to stay at his home in Westchester and work out of his office in Manhattan when he can, but that's not what happens all the time, especially if it's Easter weekend. Governor Cuomo hosted an Easter egg hunt and open house at the New York State Governor's Mansion a day before Easter, Saturday, April 15th. It was the second time for the event at the Albany Mansion. It began in 2016 with the idea of making it an annual springtime tradition. Although the event lasted only 2 hours from 1 to 3 p.m., it also included tours of the historic residence in Albany and opportunities to meet the governor and his girlfriend, Sandra Lee, well known from the Food Network. Activities included an egg roll on the lawn, watching and petting a few farm animals and bunnies, and networking and politicking for the adults. Admission was by ticket, and tickets were distributed to the public according to who signed up in advance. Adults over the age of 16 wishing to attend had to sign up in advance and could bring one guest and any young child from their household. They were warned that weapons and controlled substances, as well as bags, backpacks, luggage, parcels, briefcases, and similar things, were strictly prohibited from the event. The Easter egg event at the Executive Mansion was first held in 2016, as I mentioned, and replaced the earlier tradition of a New Year's Day open house at the mansion. That event was stopped in January 2015 when the new year marked both Cuomo's second inauguration and the death of his father, former Governor Mario Cuomo.
Well, that was very, very pleasant. It's nice to see Governor Andrew Cuomo just, you know, doing something warm and wonderful.
There was one warm and wonderful moment at the end of Astorino's speech last night, if I recall, John.
Yes. Armando Ciccolello received Westchester's highest honor, the Distinguished Service Award. He fought at Pearl Harbor and also received the Bronze Star for meritorious service during the invasion of Okinawa. And that he's there with Robert Astorino. And of course, last Sunday was Easter Sunday, and we visited the sunrise service held over at the First Baptist Church, and that's how it looked at 6 a.m. while the worshipers were awaiting the sunrise. 6:15, 6:20, and 6:30. At 6:15, that was the exact moment when the minister, Timothy Dalton, mentioned that Christ had risen at the sunrise. John Bailey, Peter Katz, and Jim Benerofe, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.